Thank you, folks. Welcome to the Wyatt Earp Theater in Tombstone, Arizona. Before we get started gunfighting today, we've got a little bit of history for you. You know, it's been better than 1,000 years that the Apache Nation was the masters of this land that you're visiting here today. And within the Apache Nation, they had 5 tribes, or bands. And the band that lived in this exact location was called the Chiricahua. Now, the Chiricahua were special, even amongst the Apache, known as wise medicine men and fierce warriors. And they were also the last of the great tribes to defy the United States government as they imposed a reservation system. Now, nearly 200 years ago, young America fought a war with Mexico, mostly over territory, and in victory acquired a large landmass, which now makes up the modern states of Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and California. And directly after that, floods of American settlers came into this area, seeking land and fortune and opportunity. Well, that caused a conflict with the Chiricahua, and then a full-blown war. Now, whenever you got a war, you got a need for bases of operations. So in 1877, the United States Army opened up Fort Huachuca, 23 miles south of here. And Fort Huachuca is still in operation today. Now, that fort was placed there by the Army as a front during the Apache Indian Wars and to help secure the Mexican border, which is 13 miles south of there. But it also became a jumping off point for a lot of those settlers and fortune seekers coming into this area. One of them was a prospector named Ed Shefflin. So Ed Shefflin was over there at the fort looking at a map and making plans to come up into this exact area, an area which had not yet been chartered. So those Army scouts were concerned for him. After all, this was the home of Geronimo, and his band of Chiricahua were running rampant at that point. So those Army scouts, they warned Mr. Shefflin straight up. They said, if you do indeed go up there looking for your minerals, the only kind of a rock or stone you're likely to find will be your own tombstone. Luckily for us, Mr. Shefflin was a stubborn man. He did not heed those Army Scout warnings, and he made several excursions up here looking for his minerals. Then one day, by sheer luck or grace of God or whatever you want to call it, he looked out on the desert and laying right on top of the ground was a silver vein, 8 inches wide by 12 feet long, right over here where the good enough mine tour is today. And it was customary in those days to name your claim, so he thought it'd be funny if he called it the Tombstone because of those Army Scout warnings. So the camp within the town grew up around the silver. But when this town was first established, it wasn't called Tombstone. That was just the silver claim. The original name for this town was Goose Flats. Yep, Goose Flats. Well, that name didn't stick around too long, thank God. In 1879, the miners got together and incorporated the town, and they got talking about it, and they said, that's a stupid name. So they decided to rename it Tombstone in honor of Mr. Shefflin and his silver. And I'm glad they did, too, I tell you. Because I can't imagine Kurt Russell and Val Kilmer making a movie called Goose Flats, can you? So the town grew up and had a population boom in 1880 around the silver. Estimates run as high as 20,000 people lived here at that time, but we can't really be sure how many people were here because, see, they thought differently back then. In order to be part of the census, you had to be male and you had to be a landowner. So there might have been even more than 20,000 people here. We just don't know for sure. But what we do know is that Tombstone got very big. In fact, at one point, this was the largest city between St. Louis and San Francisco. Now, to give you an idea of just how big we got, Allen Street, the historical street up here, at one point had 106 saloons on it. 106 saloons. I don't know about you folks, but that's my idea of heaven. But it was also a recipe for disaster. I mean, think about it. You got 106 saloons on one street, and at any given time, several hundred, if not thousands, of drunken cowboys, miners, gamblers, gunfighters, and Mexican banditos, all of them armed. You don't have to be much of a mathematician, I don't think, to figure out the end result. It was chaos and mayhem. Now, as far as the red light district goes, that too was big business. The red light district began at the Birdcage Theater, was 2 blocks wide by 8 blocks long, and at one point, Tombstone had 3,400 registered ladies of the night. 3,400. Now, I use the term registered because, you see, to be a lady of the night back then, you had to go to City Hall and pay a fee and get a license. So, yeah, Tombstone was making money off those shady ladies back then. Now, this town, first and foremost, was a mining camp. It was made possible due to the silver that lies in the ground. Today, Tombstone is Arizona's second largest tourist attraction, second only to that big ditch up north. But this town is still on the map today, thanks to bloodshed. You folks are all here today thanks to bloodshed. So to give you an idea of the bloodshed that occurred here, we use the years 1879 to 1883. And if you compare that era to modern day New York or Los Angeles per capita, we did indeed have a higher murder rate. You know, I often tell folks that if I could get in a time machine and come back here, I wouldn't come back as an outlaw or a lawman. There's just no money in that. Truth be told, if I could come back, I'd come back as the Undertaker. Now that guy was making some money. In fact, Tombstone supported 3 full-time undertakers, and that was just unheard of. Most cities only had one. He was usually just a part-timer. But of all the shootings and killings that took place here back in the wild days, the most famous, of course, was the gunfight at the Ok Corral. Now that gunfight didn't actually take place in the corral, but in a vacant lot behind it, at one point spilling out onto Fremont Street, which is the highway. But over 30 shots were fired in less than a minute on 26 October 1881 between 2 and 3 p.m. in the afternoon, and 3 men were killed. Or as a newspaper said so poetically the next day, they were hurled into eternity. The brothers Tom and Frank McClowry and Billy Clanton, dead. On the Earp side, 3 men were wounded. City Marshal Virgil Earp was brought down to one knee as a bullet went into his calf muscle. And his younger brother, 31-year-old Morgan Earp, took one right between the shoulder blades. Then there was John Henry Holliday, better known as Doc Holliday. Now the movies don't show this, but he actually received a bullet in that gunfight. It hit him in the hip area and ricocheted off his gun belt. It hurt him so bad he truly thought he was gut shot. So the only man to stand in that gunfight and not receive a bullet, and therefore sealing his fate as the most legendary lawman in Western history, is a fellow called Wyatt Earp. Wyatt Earp had lived till 1 month shy of his 81st birthday, dying in 1929 in Los Angeles, California, of natural causes. So today, folks, we're going to do some reenactments of shootings and killings that took place here in Tombstone back in the wild days. As I said before, this town was made possible thanks to silver. But we're still on the map today, thanks to blood. Now that being said, who's ready to see a gunfight?